good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us from. I'm Annette Richmond. This is Content Marketing School, and I'm so excited to have my guest, Scott Lawrence, here with me today. And Scott, I can't say that I met you through, but I sort of found you through our mutual friend, Brenda Meller. You were on her show, and I was like, oh my gosh, I hope you will come on my show too. And I'm so excited that you said yes and are here with me today because this is such a great topic. And I think it will be helpful to a lot of people, because it's so important for people to have all kinds of photos. So, for anyone who doesn't know you, please tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Well, thanks for having me, Annette. So I am a full-time headshot and portrait photographer. I'm in Detroit. I started my business in Chicago, actually, and then moved to Detroit a couple of years after, so I had to kind of restart it. I do pretty much exclusively professional images, so it's like 90% corporate. I have some things that I dabble in here and there, but most of it is corporate headshots. So it's a lot of LinkedIn stuff, a lot of website about images, that sort of thing. I work with a lot of lawyers, doctors, salespeople. So I've been doing this for about almost 10 years. And before that, I was in the corporate world. I was in the insurance industry, actually. So made that transition. It's been an interesting transition, and it's just kind of the blend of both backgrounds has served me pretty well now running my own business. Oh, I think you might be muted there.
That's for me, forever muted, because we have two loud dogs here and I'm so used to always muting myself. And that's quite a switch though that you made, quite a career change.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, it was quite a jump, and I'm glad I did it. But it's it's nice working for yourself, but it does come with its own challenges.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely, for sure. So, so let's kind of jump right into it. And we were talking a little bit before we went live about this whole idea of personal branding photos. And headshots I think are part of that, and are certainly important for people on LinkedIn. But I think people have more of an idea of what they're supposed, what those are supposed to be like. And what I'm thinking were personal branding photos that I've been seeing for several years are people, pictures of people, usually it's sitting at their desk, working on the computer, or, and they're just kind of still these, like, they could almost be a headshot, except that they have the environment around them, really.
Yeah.
And yet there are others, like Brenda Meller, who, works with you, and her shots, what I consider to be personal branding photos, shows so much more personality. And I think that is the goal for people to, to have these other photos. So can you talk a little bit about kind of what personal branding photos are, what we should think of them as?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the definition is, it's pretty broad, and it's a little pliable in a lot of respects. But so I would say there's kind of the personal branding side, like you described. It's more, they're popular for like an Instagram type content audience. So it is more of a environmental type portrait. You're at your desk, you're if you're if you run a yoga studio, you're in your yoga studio. If you own a hair salon, you're in the hair salon, just kind of doing all things in the environment.
Mm-hmm.
And those are good, and they tend to have this nice aesthetic quality. And if they're done right, they look really nice. But you do kind of run into some limitations, I've found, when you get into certain marketing functions. And so I tend to, one, as a studio photographer, I like working in a studio. It gives me a lot of consistencies and control with what we're doing, and it's just from a business standpoint, it's also a lot more efficient. But I find that working in the studio environment gives you a lot more functional results from an image perspective, so that you can use, you really don't have any constraints in how and where you can use the images. Uh,
Hmm.
and then also with, so the backgrounds, um, people used to get more concerned about the backgrounds, and it's a little stereotypical, but I used to get a lot of calls from realtors, and they'd want to be, I live in uh, Rochester, Michigan, which is a nice little suburb in Detroit, and we have a nice downtown, and people would want these images of them walking around downtown and everything, and that's great. But that setup takes
Hmm.
times as long to do and costs 3 times as much. Or you can come to my studio for half hour, 45 minutes, and we can put in some backgrounds if you really want. And most of the time I'm finding now, you think about LinkedIn, even Instagram, websites, that sort of thing. Most of the images, when you're talking about just as a personal branding image, you don't need a lot, like the background's not that important. The way you look, I consider, I tell people, is more important. So if you want to look comfortable, approachable, background is less important. And so that's kind of my take on it. It's a little more focused on the individual and those expressions that you talked about, as opposed to, worrying about where exactly we're photographing.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm finding.
I think that too. And the thing is too, a lot of people, I know even when I have pictures of myself, I think most people that we tend to just remove the background anyway, because you can
Mhm.
go on Canva and all these
Yep.
other sites and just remove the background. And then you just put yourself, you sort of the cardboard cutout of you
Yeah.
wherever you want. And
Yeah.
so the background does become less important, because I know, I do a lot of things sitting here, and obviously my background is very busy, but it makes me smile, so
Right.
I like it, and it
Right.
kind of reflects. I feel like it reflects me a little bit, but I do think of that, and it's funny that you mentioned Instagram, because I've been doing a lot of experimenting lately, and a lot of people use the photos like what you were talking about, of them in the studio, or maybe a little short clip of them in the studio, and then it's just text over the image. And
Yep.
that's what it is, and that seems to be, to me, as I'm investigating and experimenting right now with these different platforms, seems to be like the preferred thing.
Yeah, yeah, and I just find it so much more flexible to have, images of yourself that are lit and posed well than
Mhm.
be in some particular space. There's just, from a strictly marketing perspective, there's just so many more possibilities you have with those images. That's really the benefit when it comes down to it, in my opinion.
Okay. So when you're talking about that, and does it make I'm thinking it does, but does it make a difference sort of who you are? Because I'm thinking, even, a lawyer, if it's an images for their website, if they might want to have something, I don't know, maybe a little bit different than just sitting at the desk. Obviously, you can please
Yep.
tell me. I'm interested to learn. But someone like me, or like Brenda, we want to have something that might be more fun.
Mhm.
And partly because we're allowed to, we can do what
Yeah.
we want because
Yeah.
we work for ourselves. So and it's our brand. So can you talk a little bit about the differences between, working on these, non-headshot type images with different types of people?
So, you have your, if you have, so I have a lot of law firms that are large law firms, and
Mhm,
they're more, well, they have a challenge, and any big organization has a challenge. So law firms, consultants, accounting firms, that sort of thing, where, the person you're hiring is the product. So they kind of walk this balance of having a repeatable, image solution, so that they can have a standard look, while
mhm.
still, having some personality in the images. And that's a lot harder than a lot of people realize. That, they think, oh, just, headshots. Well, if you got to do headshots around the country, there's just technically a lot of stuff that's going on there. Then you get into, like, so if you take the law firm example, a smaller law firm, maybe just a few people, you have some more creative freedom with that. So, for that type of thing, I'm going to do still a tighter headshot, shoulders up, or maybe even waist up, and then we'll experiment a little bit more with some different poses, different angles. Sometimes I use like a posing table, so it kind of gives you almost like a bar counter or a table to lean against. So that just kind of changes it up a little bit. Sometimes
Okay.
throw in a stool or a chair just to kind of have different angles and options. But then, like you had talked about too, I think regardless of regardless of what the subject does, you want to
Mhm.
get, at least I try to get the most comfortable expressions and just get them calmed down. And that's the most important part, no matter what. Posing aside, or applications aside, is that getting to the comfortable pose, the comfortable expression. That's what you want. And then the rest is more, those can be aesthetic decisions based on websites, your social media marketing, that sort of thing.
So I want to ask you more about that, but I want to ask you about something else first.
Yeah.
Now, when you're talking about, say, for someone like me, or
Mhm.
someone who's a consultant, it
Yeah.
might even be someone who, they might do different kinds of consulting work. Maybe they're creative or something like
Sure.
that. They were fractional CMO or something like that.
Mhm.
So, eh, how should photos be? Like, should it be sort of a mix of more serious and funny, or am I, off
No,
the
I no,
track?
I that's a good question. So I like to tell people that in the studio, to get the most bang for your buck, essentially, for your investment, you want to just get as much as possible. So, I try to shoot big smiles, kind of more relaxed face, more serious, and then, hopefully we get some outtakes, some funny expressions as well. So, kind of do a full range, and that sometimes is challenging for people because most people have like a favorite or a preferred smile or whatever facial expression they like to do in pictures. And so there's a bit of a challenge to kind of get over that initial hump of,
Mhm.
okay, that's fine, and we can do that, but let's also do all these other expressions too. And it varies with how much somebody is somebody's willing to play along. But I tell them, you now, or in the studio, it's not the time to edit looks. That's after the fact. When you're in the studio, you capture as much as possible because you're
Mhm.
building basically like a stock library is the way to think about it.
Yeah.
So I go for the full range as often as I can, and then we think about, okay, and I'll tell people too, you want to choose the image for the page that it's going to live on, not the
Mhm.
other way around. So, people will have, a lot of people have their favorite sides, or, they like to be looking this way or that way or whatever. And I say, well, that's good for you, but it's at the end of the day, these images are marketing assets, which is something I like to tell people more these days. And it's not so much what's your favorite picture of yourself, it's what works in this space. And I think that's kind of an important hump that you want to get over when you're, thinking about any personal branding, is that sometimes you just need an image where you're facing this way or that way. Sometimes you need a full length image. Sometimes you need a waist up, or sometimes you just need a tight, headshot crop. And I think getting people to that mindset of you're really building a stock catalog of images of yourself.
Mhm.
And they're not all going to be your favorite, but that's okay. They're going
Yeah.
to work in all the spaces. I think that's the most important part to think about.
So I love that you said what you said for a couple of reasons, and I will say one. I have a friend, one of my, she's local to me, one of my good friends, and like, I think it's something like in every single photo, and she has the pose with the teeth, and
Yep,
somebody puts the camera on, and she goes,
yep, yep, yep.
and which
Yep.
I think is so funny. But the thing is, though, she does always look good in those little
Yep.
snapshots. But I also think it's interesting because when I've worked with clients and talked to them about like their headshots on LinkedIn, and people think like, oh, well, this is my favorite photo,
Mhm.
and then they ask their friends, and their friends all see them. They see the person they know. Like once I meet you, whatever
Right.
photo I see of you, I'm going to see the person that I met. And yet, as you say, that's not the point. It's for those people who don't know you, who are
Right.
going to be looking at it, what's going to appeal to them. And so that's what I think the idea is, to get maybe shots that appeal to different people.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, and even people that don't know you, like said, sometimes I feel like I've got a better, for most clients that I don't really know ahead of time. Um, you know, I, I mean, I like to think that I have a better perception of what looks better to most people than, you looking at your own picture, because you have your own biases. We all have our own biases,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
they're very strong. But yeah, going back to what we said, it's not, they're not for you. And if you need a picture facing this way, but everything is, but you only like to go this way, you just need to get over that obstacle. That's important.
Yeah. Well, I love that. And, and I think it's so important. And I try to think this way too. I think we all, well, I know myself, I go in and you kind of think maybe this is what you're looking for, but you have to trust the person that you hire. I
Yeah.
mean, if someone comes to you, they're hiring you because you know better than
Yep.
they do. And so I think of that. And so, can you just share a couple of tips, because we were talking? I talked to you a little bit about this before we went live, and there are people who have had bad experiences. I mean, actually, the most recent experience I had, I was at a conference, and they had someone there doing headshots, and I figured, okay, it was free, part of the conference. And even though I hate to take have my picture taken, which I told you,
Hmm.
video all day long,
Hmm.
live all day long, picture, no, please no. And it was just so stilted. It was, it was like with the backdrop, with the stool, and it was like,
Yep.
and the photographer actually said to me, a lot of the women like to pose like this with with their chin on their hand. And I was like, no, I don't think so. I don't think that's for me. And the pictures were, I mean, I didn't expect much, but they were really horrendous.
Yeah.
And I think that so many people have an experience like that because they go to someone who
Yep.
is maybe a great photographer, but maybe they're a great product photographer or
Yep.
something, and they don't have the challenge. So I actually have two questions for you.
Okay.
Answer however you would like. One question is, if you can give a few tips for DIY people like me. I told you
Okay.
ahead of time that I put my camera on the dining room table and I snap some pictures of me, and if you go to a photographer, what should you look for, and what should you ask, and how should you kind of feel? Should you meet them in advance or talk to them on video or something? So that's
Yeah.
kind of like a big twofold question.
Okay. So let's talk about finding a photographer first, because I'm actually
Okay.
working on. Uh, I have a couple of videos on that on my my YouTube channel.
Okay.
Um, so I've been thinking about that a lot, and especially as I have clients with people in multiple locations where I'm trying to help them find somebody. So I've started to kind of think about that a little bit more specifically. I will say though, let me jump back to your event example though. That's something it's a challenging situation, because it's a super popular concept these days to do like a headshot booth. In fact, I've
Mhm.
got one scheduled next week. I'm going to be in Detroit for 2 days, doing headshots all day. And those are, so they, I like to think that I provide a pretty good headshot in a couple of minutes. But obviously you can't do everything that you can do in an hour session. Um, so the thing with those, I would just tell you that, you take it what it is. You got to play along with a photographer. They're going to have kind of a system, and if they're good, they're going to be able to get you posed pretty efficiently. But
Mhm.
you got to play along. If you're kind of stiff going in, that's kind of an uphill battle to start. But I will say, just from a marketing standpoint, they're great events, and there's lots of fun things we can do now in terms of delivering galleries right away, so you can get a email gallery on your phone, that sort of thing. So those are fun, but they're harder than they look. So then, in terms of finding a session, or finding a photographer for like
Mhm.
a personal session,
Yep.
I like to tell people, you want, I think we touched on it earlier, is that you want to find firstly somebody that specializes or talks about headshot photography. So you got to have somebody that's familiar, that's used to doing work. And what I say is, we work with non-models every day, and that's a lot different than wedding photographers, baby photographers,
Hmm. Hmm.
fashion photographers. I go to a friend of mine who's he's a Canon Explorer of Light, and he does so he's like sponsored by Canon, and he does these great workshops. But all the models are about 6 feet tall, and maybe 110 pounds. So it's just they're not representative of the people that I work with. So you want to have somebody that photographs people like you in your context. And that should be pretty evident from the website. So you should be able to go to the website, whether it's Instagram or website, and you should see, what you're going to get.
Hmm.
And this is hard for us as photographers. We want to show all our work, but you only really need a few images to say, okay, this is what this person does. If I go here, I can kind of see myself in this recipe, for lack of a better word, because that's
Hmm.
important. It may be, some people might say it's less creative, but it's you're effectively delivering a commercial product. So it's
Hmm.
it's commercial
Yeah.
photography at the end of the day. So you want to kind of know, and you want to show people what you're going to deliver.
Yeah.
So that's important. And then the next thing I would say is that if they have other social media, so whether it be YouTube or Instagram, just something where you can kind of get a sense of the personality, so you can see if this is somebody I could hang out with for an hour. I think I can
Hmm.
get along, or not. And either way, that's that helps you make your decision. And then Google reviews are important as well. Some testimonials here and there, but those are kind of the main things. I'd say you want to make sure it's somebody that does what you need.
Hmm.
And then somebody that you can get along with, and you kind of have some connections with. I think
Hmm.
those are the most important things. And then I would say, like, just practically speaking, if like we're in the cold climates, so it's good to have a studio in the winter. Otherwise you got to worry about other logistics, and even in the summer now, it's like 100 degrees outside.
Yeah.
So that sort of like practical aspect too is a lot of photographers are totally remote, and they'll come and set up in your garage, and that's great, and it works for some people and it doesn't for others. I like having a studio. So but yeah, those are kind of the main things in picking a photographer.
So
Yeah.
before you give me some DIY tips, so
Mhm.
what is your YouTube channel? What is it? Is it
It's
let's share that for people listening on the podcast.
Sure. So if you just go to, so it's just Scott Lawrence Photo. So you can go to youtube.com/Scott Lawrence Photo, or if you go to just scottlawrencephoto.com, you'll see the YouTube social links on the bottom.
Okay,
Uh,
cool.
and then my Instagram too is the same thing, Scott Lawrence Photo, and there's a link to all the stuff there.
Great.
So for DIY, I think you can do a lot with an iPhone. Honestly, I think the tricks are really come down to more posing than anything.
Mhm.
Biggest thing with an iPhone is the default camera is a little bit more of a wider lens, so it's like a 24 to 35 millimeter range, so it's pretty wide.
Okay.
For a headshot, you're usually using a little bit longer lens. So I would actually, so if you got a phone with multiple lenses on it, I would click the 2x or maybe the 5x, but probably try the 2x for starters. That's going to give you a little bit better portrait proportions,
Okay.
so that you're not going to have as much distortion. Um, and then I would look for just good natural light. So whether it be maybe a big curtain, some blinds you can kind of control, so you don't have really extreme lighting.
Mhm.
Um, and then just look for, like we touched on this before, but just simple. Look for simple backgrounds. So simple wall is fine. Just something without a lot of distractions. If you're trying to, because again, you're probably going to cut these things out and put them in different places. So to just have a simple background, that just makes it all
Mhm.
that much easier.
Yeah.
And then if you have a friend that can help you shoot, or there's lots of stands you can get for phones. Some of them you can trigger with your watch. So that's those are kind of the initial tips. I'd say, start with just getting the right lens on the iPhone. That will help a
Mhm.
lot. And then just nice, simple lighting, soft lighting, that goes a long way. And then make sure that you don't have like overhead light coming down. So for those of us with less hair, if I don't have my ceiling lights on now, but I would get shine right here. And that's something. So if you're in if you have enough window light, turn the ceiling lights off and you'll get a more front lit portrait as opposed to the hard light coming down, which is usually not flattering for anyone.
Yeah, no, I love that you said that, and, I do a lot of video for social media, even,
Yeah,
LinkedIn and whatnot, so I have a variety of tripods that I use, but anybody can buy an inexpensive
yeah.
tripod for probably around 20 bucks or less,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
there's you buy the stuff on Amazon or whatever, and it's so easy, just have
Yep,
something, to put your phone on, and I appreciate all of that.
yep.
So I wanna ask you, and I wanna just, ask you, I want to share your LinkedIn profile. And as I'm pulling that up, I always like to ask everybody that I talk to for their final thoughts because I think we've had, an interesting conversation here,
Mhm.
and I
Yeah.
appreciate all the gems that you have shared. For the people here and listening on the podcast later. But what would you add, that I haven't asked you, we haven't talked about, that you think would be important for people to know? And, it can be, any topic, any topic that would want to focus on. And I'm just gonna pull up your LinkedIn profile while you're giving us your final thoughts, so we'll say.
Let me I'm going to go back to one more DIY tip.
Okay.
And that's on and then we'll jump back. The one really important thing on if you're using an iPhone is just the camera angle relative to like to your eye line. So, you have the popular selfie angle where everybody
Mhm.
puts their phone out way up high. You don't want to do that when it comes to a headshot or any sort of professional image because you're basically, as soon as you raise the camera up, you are putting yourself in a non-dominant or much weaker position. So to have it kind
Mhm.
of more eye level gives you a much more authoritative, confident look. So that's something that a lot of people miss. And then the response for that is that you get people that worry about their their necklines and that sort of thing. And so for that, and I've got some videos on my YouTube channel, but you really want to just push your neck out, push your chin out. That will help. So check out some video. I've got some good videos on that. And then I guess for some final thoughts, I think going back to just kind of the purpose of a professional image is it's not for you, it's for your audience. Um, and you want to be comfortable with be comfortable with working and trust a photographer when you hire somebody, and that will give you the best results. And I think you kind of have to check your um, doubts at the door, and if you can do that and they'll help you do that, we all help our clients through that. But if you can kind of get over that initial hump, and then you start to realize that you can have a little fun, you'll look good, and then you'll get some really useful images that you can use all over the place. So
And I think it's also, like, if I'm working with you, you're not sharing my photos all over the place, so if I look at the pictures afterwards and I'm like, "Oh, no, that's just horrible,"
right,
nobody else is gonna see it, right?
right, right.
So take that. So I'm showing your LinkedIn profile
Yeah.
right now over here, and I wanted to scroll down to your, featured section, and
Mhm.
so here, I'm assuming that these are all on your YouTube channel, that you have
Yes,
different.
the video on the right there is that's on the channel, and then I think the other interviews, those are past interviews that I've done, and those are on my about page, I think.
Okay, okay,
So
and
yeah,
this is you when you were on Brenda's show,
yep,
and
yep,
so people can start even by going to your LinkedIn profile and then, checking on things
yeah,
there, and then going, to your YouTube channel as well, and the the spelling of your name is Scott with 2 T's,
Yep.
and the Lawrence is Lawrence,
Yep.
correct?
Yep.
Okay, so
That's
Scott
correct.
Lawrence photo, if
Mhm.
you're listening on the podcast, because I've been on your channel, and you have a lot of good stuff on
Thanks.
there.
Thanks.
So I appreciate that. So we have come to the end of our time together. It went by so fast, as I
Okay. Yep.
promised you it
Yep.
would. So
Sure
hopefully
did. Yep.
hopefully it was fun for you, and
Yeah,
I
it was
thank you
great.
so
Yeah.
much for the gems. I have just, mentally taken some notes, and I'm going to be looking at those myself before I start using my camera again. So again, I thank you so much for spending this time with me, and just saying yes. I really
Yeah.
appreciate it. I'm always grateful when I find these amazing, interesting people and they say yes to me. So
My pleasure. Yeah.
thank
Thanks
you
for
so
having me.
much. For everyone else, have a great rest of your day, and I will be seeing you next week.